Hey everybody, welcome to the Monday edition of the Daily Friend Show. We're so glad to have you back. I'm your host, Big Daddy Liberty. Glad to be back. Thank you so much to Gabriel Krause for holding the fort down in the last 2 weeks.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Guys, I'm not alone, as I always say. We've got Gabriel in the house. Gabriel, of course, is a writer and analyst here at the Institute of Race Relations. And, of course, we're also joined by Mr. Ian Cruikshanks. Good sir, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, thank you.
Ian is the chief economist at the Center for Risk Analysis here with us, And of course, last but not least, we have Sarah Gunn, who's the editor-in-chief of The Daily Friend. Hello, Sarah.
How's it, sickly?
Guys, remember, you can find all our analysts and writers and their various pieces on The Daily Friend. You can find that by going to dailyfriend.co.za. Guys, jam-packed show. Interesting stuff that's happened recently. Let's begin here. Our SOEs, our state-owned enterprises, we all know are a massive headache for the economy, for the country, and for the government debt bill. But on this particular one, we have a piece by John Kane Berman in the Daily Friend, where he looks at the actors involved. In this case, one Cyril Ramaphosa and Gordhan. I'm going to pose the question to you guys. First things first. Can we expect realistically and from an analytical perspective a Gordhan or Ramaphosa fixing the mess of SOEs? And are they, if I were to open the question even broader, are they not part of the problem, Gabriel?
Yeah, so I mean, the opening premise of or the catalyst for John Kane Berman's piece is that Pravin Gordhan went to read the Riot Act, so to speak, to the Eskom board, saying, "Look, we've got to be serious. We've got to streamline. We've got to make this thing efficient. We've got to make it self-sustaining. This is very important for the country." And then the question is he the right person to really be delivering this message, or is this a bit of the pot calling the kettle black? Now, one of the problems is that Gordhan himself last year, Eskom's board chairman was Jabu Mabuza. He said 33% of Eskom's employees are redundant. They're not really adding value. And they tried to move to cutting down the size of Eskom's employment. And that's partly because if you look at around 2008, there were... don't have the fingers on the tip of my tongue, but it's sort of half as many Eskom employees as they were in 2018, and yet we were making more or less the same amount of electricity. That's crazy. So cutting jobs was a very important thing to do, and basically it was Gordhan who said no, we're not going through with retrenchments under a Ramaphosa leadership. So that's a big problem. And then John Kane Berman, and he pointed this out last week to me on this show as well, and I was caught a little bit off guard, and there was this awkward moment of silence, but he said, I was saying Ramaphosa was very quiet during the Zuma years, and so that gave people reason to hope that, maybe he's being tactically quiet. He actually disagrees a lot with what's going on, but when the time comes, when he actually has a bit of power, then he's going to make the right calls. And John said, Gabriel, he might have been quiet, but that doesn't mean he was sitting on his hands. He was doing things. And one of the things he was doing was leading the ANC's cadre deployment. That's he was the head of deployment for the ANC, of the deployment committee. Yeah. And that was, so he had a major say in sending people to the boards of our SOEs, Eskom in particular, but SABC, SAA, Denel, and so on. And so when Ramaphosa says, we've got to change the boards because management is the problem, well, Ramaphosa was the person who put the management in there in the first place. Some of the management is good, some of the management's been a bit bad. The real thing to look at is, will we be allowed to retrench people? Will we be allowed to fire people where there's real evidence that they've done wrongdoing? And will the procurement policy, because a huge part of the extra cost has been buying rubbish coal for too much money from Trillion and the Guptas and so on, will we change the procurement policy so that you can buy the cheapest stuff? Or does the procurement policy remain a kind of BEE thing where it's not just about black empowerment, it's also about which black person is most buddy with which guy on the board or in the government, network. The cronies network. That's the real description of it. Is it going to be cronies or is it going to be real capitalism?
I'll come to you just now, Ian. Sorry, this is such a central issue, isn't it? The idea that actually the manager's prerogative to manage a business properly and respond to market inputs, especially when the market's saying, look, dude, we can't sustain you at this current size, firstly. And also at these sort of low prices, or high prices in terms of the low quality of coal that we're buying. But just to zoom into you, to get your view on this, will there be any South African who's listening to us now sort of opine on this issue? Is it realistic for them to expect, well, Gabriel's maybe painted this picture of, yes, Ramaphosa was part of the mess of getting us into this position, but let's have faith in Gordhan. Gordhan, he's the good guy, right? And he's often posited as such in the papers. He will fix the SOEs. How am I wrong, Sarah, or am I right?
I think Gordhan is an ideologue. I think he's an ideologue in the sense that he really does not want to see the entities privatized. And that is probably the bottom line of what's going on here. Is people like, sorry, I don't remember his first name, but the CEO, Girano, who resigned. One gets the impression, I don't have detail, but one gets the impression that he resigned because as a business person, his assessment of Eskom was a lot of things have to change very radically, and the board didn't support him because I suspect the board is rather neither here nor there. Gordhan would not have approved because what Gordhan wants is the state-owned entities to remain state-owned entities. And I think when he read the Riot Act, what he was saying was, get things into gear and work hard at making sure that we find a solution in which the state-owned entities remain the state-owned entities. And the very fact that he not only said there would not be retrenchments when management said there needed to be retrenchments, so he spoke from on high, completely irregular. And then when they said no percentage increase because I'm sorry, but Eskom cannot afford any increase at this stage, they ended up with a 7.5% increase because Gordhan said, no, there must be an increase. If Gordhan wants what Gordhan wants, he may as well run it.
Ian,
can I quickly say something about Gordhan?
Let me cut Ian. Hold that. No. Ian, I actually want to have a specific question to you on this particular one, because any international investor looking at this is clearly perturbed. If you have a business that cannot run itself because it has political interference, and again, we're not the only country that has SOEs, but I think when you have SOEs that have so much debt on their books that they can actually sink the country, it becomes a problem, doesn't it, Ian?
It becomes a huge problem. Yeah. And you said, clearly the SOEs are causing us a bit of a headache. A headache? No. All the SOEs need to go into intensive care, and a whole side of them sliced off and not given back to them. And I think that this is what needs to be done. Will it be done? Unlikely. But it's time for drastic action. And we see Mr. Gordhan intervening against this. We are going to have to put up with an economy that's hardly working for the foreseeable future.
Sorry, Gabriel,
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say one other thing about Gordhan. While you were away, he made headlines by saying SAA can fly. And this is a very important SAA is a hugely important test case. It's like the canary in the coal mine, because SAA, even the most radical socialist ideologue, has got to recognize that SAA is really servicing customers that are relatively well-to-do. Yeah. It's not a key strategic asset in the same way that Eskom is and that SABC is. So it's a much easier one to let go from a purely socialist ideological point of view. And yet he is leading the charge to say, just on the back of another several billion rand bailout in this company that keeps bleeding money because it's poorly managed. No. We mustn't let go. We must clutch. We must hold harder. And I am a little bit of a naysayer on Gordhan. Last year, Beelt made him the person of the year, and they invited the institute. They invited me to sort of weigh in on that, and I said I think this is a disastrous decision. I think that he's probably the most overrated person in this country. Right. And I will say that when he was fired under Zuma, I was there that very day in the union buildings. There was a march. There were only about 100 of us. I went there because I thought Gordhan is great in the following measure. He has not tried to line his own pockets. In that sense, he was different from so many people in the Zuma era. But that is not enough. It's not enough to have someone who's not trying to steal directly. You also need someone who's prepared to say other people are stealing directly, other people are not stealing directly, but they've got redundant jobs. You've got to have someone who can say that too. And Gordhan passes the first test, but I'm afraid he fails the others.
Absolutely. Guys, let's shift the conversation. But we will, guys, look out for a lot of this analysis in our Daily Friend pieces. They are coming. Make sure you click on that website and find the pieces on there. Guys, some good news, I think, for the South African consumer. The fuel price is set to go down. Absolutely. Please do not sue us, asshole. I know you've trademarked that glug statement. But guys, the fuel price is going down. Is there something to be said Is there a silver lining, or rather, is this a silver lining for the consumer, Ian?
It's a ray of light, perhaps not a silver lining. That means a bit drastic improvement. However, the fuel price is adjusted at every month end to make account for the previous adjustment that went on average through this last month. And what we say is then the cost of fuel is made up by the oil price and the cost of transport and the dollar-rand exchange rate. Now, what we find then is at the beginning of the month, we may be paying so many rands per litre or per barrel. Now, the oil prices come down, we pay fewer rands, provided the dollar-rand exchange rate stays level. But what we've seen in the last month, the month of June, is that there's been an under-recovery. Correction. There's been an over-recovery. An over-recovery which amounts on the petrol price to 67... Sorry, I messed that up. There's been an over-recovery on the petrol price of 95 cents a litre and of diesel, 67 cents a litre. These are both vitally important because our transport is majority on the road. We need the liquid fuel. And don't forget the poorest people who have no access to electricity or any other fuel except for liquid paraffin. And that has been an over-recovery of 57 cents a litre. Just because of we've paid more rands than we should have per quantity than has been planned a month in advance. Now, every month end there's an adjustment. So we should see it coming down by almost precisely the over-recovery or under-recovery in this last month, the over-recovery. And that should then, you'd say, feed straight into inflation, straight into an adjustment in prices. After all, speak to any taxi driver. He knows exactly what the oil price is and the dollar-rand exchange rate. And as soon as the basic fuel price goes up, taxi fares go up as well. But when they come down, they don't come down. And this is the big problem. The price is sensitive to fuel prices going up, whether it's agricultural products, whatever sort of food it is, the basics, bread and meat and milk and so on. They move immediately. But they don't come down. Now, if government wants to make an adjustment to help the consumer, especially the poorest, they should be looking into that and saying, why are we sensitive only to rising prices and not declining prices? That is the way to get to the bottom of inflation. After all, the inflation target is 3 to 6%. It's now in the middle at 4.5%. That's where they'd like to anchor it, there or thereabouts. Especially that's what the Reserve Bank says. They'd like to have a single-digit target. Now, this is the time to do it. And if they did that, they would then also encourage investors, investment flows, which have been going severely out because of political developments. We've lost 45 billion rand to the JSE last month. 1 month. That's a massive amount. And we can't afford it. If that carries on, we're in serious trouble on offsetting the twin deficits, the budget deficit and the current account deficit. Now is the time to do a little bit of something for the sake of the consumers. Maybe even consider an interest rate drop, although that may be difficult to maintain foreign capital flows with lower interest rates. But nevertheless, now is the time to move. We'll see if they do.
Guys, Ian's raising a very important point here. The consumer is so under pressure, and it isn't just the poor individual anymore. You now have, working class, upper working class, middle class families having to really think about what they buy and what they don't buy, and how they spend and what they don't spend stuff on. Gabriel, I'm going to come to you just from an analytical perspective. I'm worried with the trend that Ian speaks of prices going up in response to the market, but not necessarily coming down, or in what should also be a response to the market price. This has an effect on that individual, that poor chap, if you will, who cannot budget properly because of, essentially... let me rephrase this question, because I really want to sort of attack it. This has serious implications on the individual's trust of markets and prices, and how they should be transmitting information to them. When, on the one hand, when prices go up, their consumer prices go up, but when producer prices go down, the consumer price doesn't necessarily track that also. Is there a confidence issue in that for the consumer?
I think there probably is, and there's a temptation to kind of think that, so the government's setting the prices in terms terms of petrol, the government should also be setting the prices in terms of bread and milk and cheese and meat and so on.
I'm hoping we can avoid that.
So I think that's a bad idea. I think part of the reason that things play out the way they do is this economic concept of stickiness. So, I mean, when I learned in Econ 101, it was very nice to look at sort of vending machine prices of Coca-Cola. And they sat at $1, exactly $1 for like 15 years. And then when it jumped all the way to $1.50 and then $1.75. And then when it gets to $2 again, it stays there forever. Kind of because of how efficient it is to pay for that and how easy it is to pay for that. So one thing that companies do is that they build in the thought that, okay, once the prices have gone up, we're going to hold the prices there, and then we're making extras on the margins if our input cost comes down, and then we'll use that to then have the lag stay longer. So then when inflation catches up with that price, we can let inflation take over that price. And everyone else is racking up their prices for other things, but we can hold onto our price where it is to hold onto our customers at that lower rate because we managed to get a little bit of extra when the petrol price came down. So this is a kind of market force that people should take into account when, if they start wanting the government to set the prices immediately, they're less likely, I think, overall in a net sense to be able to do as good a job of the market. On the other hand, it does feel a little bit to me like South Africa. I was talking about milk prices earlier. Milk prices have gone down. If you ask the guys with the cows, they're getting less and less for their milk every year, and particularly seasonally, it kind of readjusts every time there's a good season, and we've had a couple in a row. But that's not translating to the consumer. Now, why is that? That's partly because we have so few major retailers, and so the environment is competitive, but it's not competitive enough. And that has to do with the regulatory burden, that has to do with the general economic climate being very depressed, and so that increases the cost of debt goes up, it makes it harder for new entrants to come in. So really what you need is more competition, and South Africa is not more competitive because South Africa is literally shrinking. Our GDP, purchasing price parity or nominal rate per person is going down.
No, I really agree, and I think there's a lot to be said, and there will be a lot more said on these issues and more. Guys, look out for this sort of quality analysis on the Daily Friend, dailyfriend.co.za. Guys, I'm going to move the conversation along to something which I think is such a polarized issue now when it comes to analyzing this man and his presidency. And yes, I am referring to one Donald Trump, who, for whatever you want to say about him, has begun to fashion himself as the peace president, or one who makes the most attempts, at least, at forging peace and addressing issues that I think American foreign policy has been trying to resolve in one way or the other for a very long time. North Korea is a prime example. The man set foot in North Korea, first time ever in a while. Sarah?
Well, the first time since the Korean War ended in 1953.
Yeah.
And I think what people underestimate about Trump is because he's not the diplomat and he's not used to this sort of subtle behind-the-scenes stuff. He does the big gesture, and there may be something to be said for the big gesture. This is the third time they've met. Their talks have not resulted in denuclearization of North Korea. He creates the impression, and this is great theatre, that this meeting came about in 24 hours as a result of a tweeted invitation by Donald Trump to Kim Jong-un to meet with him on the DMZ. I mean, the theatre of this is actually wonderful. It brings MASH to mind. And as a result, somewhere in this, they had a chat in a room on the South Korean side, but he actually stepped onto North Korean territory. So there's that huge symbolism. But I think what Donald Trump might understand that perhaps all his detractors don't is that he's creating an image that Kim Jong-un is a man of substance, that he must be taken seriously, that the president of these United States went to meet him in those circumstances. And I think we tend to underestimate the need for dictators to be shown love and respect. And I know that may sound a little bit sort of...
Yeah, it sounds perverse.
Respect, perhaps.
But it's kind of, that he's not own... And people are saying, he's giving credit to, or he's supporting Kim Jong-un's human rights abuses. And I think it's wrong, because sometimes I think you need to say to human rights abusers, you are my equal, you are a leader.
Yeah, I'll meet you on your ground.
And something could come out of it. sure as hell the other way is not working. So maybe this is. And I think people are too quick to see things in very narrow, old-fashioned terms because he is Donald Trump.
Gabriel, is this a case of Trump derangement syndrome? Anything he does, we just must criticize it for the sake of criticism, or actually is he doing something right move here?
Yeah, so I think there is something to that. When Donald Trump came in and went all guns a-blazing, rhetorically speaking, on the Twitter saying we're going to destroy you and our rockets are bigger than your rockets, I saw a lot of the commentariats here and in America say this is hugely irresponsible, this is reckless, he's playing with fire, and yet what he was doing very simply was saying the alternative to doing a deal with us is annihilation. So you have to do some kind of deal with us. Condoleezza Rice, for example, said we would have done the same thing. Hillary Clinton said, what kind of response you've got to, she said, you've got to make a credible threat of total destruction in order to bring them to the bargaining table. So when he did that, he was doing the same thing that kind of any other reasonable actor would have done, but he was derided because of the Trump derangement effect. I think now he's at the side where he's trying to say, what is the negotiated agreement? What's the best kind of deal that we can make? And a lot of largesse, a lot of handshaking, a lot of smiles. I think this is useful. And one thing that sort of an anecdotal something, it's very hard to find data, but I personally know of two entrepreneurs, one based in Germany, one based in Russia, that have, since Trump has started to speak sweetly to North Korea, moved to North Korea, tried to identify assets there, tried to identify market moves that they can make there. And they don't say that they're alone. Yes. They say that there's a very quiet little rush of, why? Because you look at the map at night and South Korea is light and North Korea is dark. So if you sell things like light bulbs, what does that make you think? If we can get a rapprochement, if we can open the borders after sanctions are open, I can make money. Absolutely. And that is the kind of thing that was not happening at all a couple of years ago. It needed first the big stick, and now the carrot is being wafted around there. And I suppose that in North Korea, there must be some people smelling that carrot and thinking, we've just been having cabbage for a long time, and now there's something sweeter on offer. And that is part of the pressure, and this is merely a balance of forces thing. The balance of forces must be greater for Kim Jong-un to take the risk of denuclearizing and seeing if he can hold on to power in a newly growing economy than it is for him to think, I can hold on to my nukes and keep repressing my people totally. The balance of forces must tilt, and I think Trump is doing what he can to tilt the balance of forces.
I think that it's an underestimation of the personalities of the people that people like Trump are dealing with, and I think it makes an enormous difference if at some point, without withdrawing sanctions for the time being or any of that, boosting the ego of the other guy. And if you can boost his ego and gain his respect and show that you may be a partner, then what Gabriel says in terms of the development of a region may start to happen. So it's certainly, I think it's more interesting than it is negative.
Yeah, just as a final thought, I want to put you on the spot on this one, but not in a bad way. We saw something similar with South Africa historically, when we were the pariah of the world stage, sanctions on us, we had a lot of capital flight, companies moving out. But as soon as we had democracy, there was almost an upswing in the economy, wasn't there? Yeah. Is North Korea, I'm being hypothetical here. Let's say the North Koreans say, look, we're going to disarm, get rid of our nukes, we want to be part of the global economy. Would that region really stand to benefit from a North Korea opening up and having a flood of investment?
Let's go to your comparison of South Africa.
Yeah.
The birth of the Rainbow Nation.
Yes.
That was also the birth of a massive business, industrial, commercial upswing. And it did a heck of a lot for the majority of the population. Jobs suddenly became available. Now, I think that what Mr. Trump is doing is looking at a similar sort of progress to say, look, they're not going to be the pariah. We're going to open the borders. There's going to be a road going through, and we're going to take trucks of goods that the North Koreans are seeing for the first time on TVs that have been allowed access to Western world programs. And I think that this is a very smart move on his behalf, and his promise of bring American business back to America is going to give them a lot of new export opportunities which they didn't have in the past. Something
just strikes me on that. While he's given a concession to the Chinese in their trade war on Huawei, he's busy punting good relations with North Korea, and he'll be the savior. And China, who's supposed to be the only country that has real influence on North Korea, It just ended up sitting there. I mean,
That's right.
you know, I think he's caught them a little flat-footed.
Yes.
I think so. And if I can add one more thing to that. So I have a friend who was in Seoul over the weekend, and she saw a massive street celebration of America, and there was music being played, and there were flags, American flags being waved together with South Korean flags, and there was chanting wonderful things about Donald Trump.
Wow.
And this person is certainly politically very uncomfortable with the Institute of Race Relations that was there, and she posted this, and she said, how awful, how terribly awful to see these people saying nice things about that orange tang. And she got 100 likes and 20 comments saying, this is disgusting, this I drank this and I spat out my wine. And I think there's this kind of sense that if the world gets better in a way that you don't like, then the world's not really getting better. If South Koreans feel safer now than they did 3 years ago, I think that it's worth including that in the equation.
Absolutely. No, guys, I agree. Let's move on, because I want us to move on to another. Can I call him a polarizing figure? Also, I suppose one Mr. Iqbal Surve.
He is the polarizing figure.
News breaks over the weekend, I believe, that he's suing other major news outlets in this country for, is it 100 billion?
100 million.
100 million. Sarah, I'm going to come to you on this one. Firstly, what is this about?
Okay.
And secondly, how credible is an Iqbal survey law, suing other people on issues of fake news?
What's really funny is that he's suing well-respected journalist Terry Bell and Media 24 for an article or report they brought out in 2016. Now, if he's being defamed, I think I kind of read it at the time. So why is he almost 3 years later? I think there might even be prescription hovering around this legally. Anyway, he's suing them for 100 million, and he's saying that, contrary to what they say, he is not dishonest and a liar. And I think the newspaper doesn't have a hell of a lot to worry about.
Yeah, truth is still a defense in defamation in South African cases.
Guys, I'm going to actually cut that one off there. I mean, me and Iqbal,
Do you not think that perhaps he's running so short of funds, of funding, that he's checking every prospect just to see, can he get a few cents here and a few cents there?
This is where fundraising.
Perhaps this is the last desperate road.
Guys, let's move on, because I think this last one is a bit of a serious one insofar as the implications it has for labor relations in South Africa. Gabriel, I'm going to move to you because I think you're more read on this than perhaps the rest of us here. But guys, I do encourage you to look out for the written pieces on this. This is it's going to be a bit of a cracker, I think. The Constitutional Court, rules in favor of essentially the workers. On a matter that's long-standing, and it developed out of Dunlop, the tire-making rubber factory, having dismissed some workers after a violent industrial action. Now, I don't know the full details on this one, but I'll let you give us a snippet of it and how this ruling is actually a bit worrisome. Yeah,
so in 2012, there was a strike near Howick down in KZN, and the strike got violent. Immediately, an interdict was sought against the violence. It didn't stop the violence, and for a month there was terrible violence. This included destruction of cameras that were recording the violence, destruction of property, burning down a manager's house, burning down a foreman's house, petrol bombs being thrown, at least on one occasion, and illegal picketing, intimidation of people who wanted to go to work, and so forth. And so what had happened is that Dunlop said, we're going to fire everyone that we have direct evidence of being there and acting violently. We're going to keep everyone who wasn't there and wasn't participating in the violent strikes. When we come back to business, they can get going again. And then there was one person who they said, you were there, so you're fired. And she appealed, and she said, no, I wasn't there. And they were like, okay, then come back to the company. And then there was this in-between group, this contentious group, where they were like, we can't prove for sure that you were there or that you weren't there. We think that you were there, but we can't prove it for sure. And we can't prove for sure that you were doing the violence rather than merely being an innocent bystander. So if you come forward and you say, I wasn't there, then you can get a job.
Yep.
If you come forward and you say, I was there, but I wasn't being violent, these are the people that were being violent, then you can keep your job. But if you're not prepared to say whether you were there or not there, if you're not prepared to say whether you saw the violence and you saw who did it or you weren't, so if you just want to be quiet and expect to come back and get a job, we're not giving you your job because then we can't trust you. And the Labour Court agreed with this determination. Some people must be fired. If they're not prepared to say they weren't there and they're not prepared to say they were there, who was doing what, then they must be fired. The Labour Court of Appeal also said the same thing, and then the Constitutional Court just overturned that and said, no, you're not allowed to do this. Why? Basically, you should expect more on this either from John Kane Berman or myself. Someone will be writing about this for the Daily Friend, I expect, to get a detailed analysis. But basically the ruling was you cannot expect people to rat out on one another.
And that's the word.
And the word used in the Constitutional Court judgment is rat. They don't use the term whistleblower, which has a more positive connotation. They don't use the term inform. They don't use the term disseminate information. They say you can't expect people to rat out on one another. And I think it's a distressing ruling because it gives this sense that what the Constitutional Court is thinking is that, like at a place like the Institute, if I'm stealing liquor from the liquor cabinet and money from the loose change department, and Sihle sees me stealing, then someone can discover this, and there's no problem with you having known it, but then not having told on me. And there's a bind of trust that employers and employees must share for the good value of the company. And it's kind of, in an abstract sense, it makes sense to me. This is the only way that things work. In a legal sense, as I say, there are very important details to cash out in terms of whether it's a fiduciary obligation or whether it's an employee obligation. And so we'll be getting into that. But overall, the kind of layman's message that the Constitutional Court seems to be sending is do violence, and as long as you're doing it with your workers, don't worry about any of them telling on you because they don't have an obligation to tell on you.
Sure. I haven't read the judgment, so I can't comment in detail. I can just talk generally around the destruction of the relationship of trust. It's a crucial issue in employment, and that's probably why the Labour Court and the Labour Appeal Court found for the company. Because, you've got to pay people for doing a job, and that there is no trust left. I mean, that is the core essence of an employment relationship. Without it, you're gone. My concern is that it's a transformative court. There are a whole lot of judgments that, as Gabriel said, we'll look at that have been, I think, fairly appalling. And I don't think the real problem is either it's not being put to the court well enough how the situation actually works, or the court just simply chooses not to appear to understand how labour relations in this country works and how fraught it can be.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing about the judgment. The judge says, let me see if I can find this quickly. The answer lies, okay, so they open up with a description of the case, and then they say, and then unfortunately there was this terrible violence, and then these people got fired. How did this happen? And then this is paragraph 2 of the judgment. The answer lies in an unfortunate fact of life, still far too often encountered in our labour relations, violence. It's not a fact of life. Here are facts of life. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Here's a fact of life. Water vapor rises and then it condenses into clouds and then it falls. Tornadoes happen. These are facts of life. These are things over which we have no control. There are facts of life, and then there are things done by human agents, which we need to hold responsible. This country is a country, I think, largely one of its big problems is that people in power don't want to hold the guilty responsible for their actions.
And implicit in that is almost the judgment saying we need to just accept that.
Yes.
That industrial action comes with violence.
It's a fact of life.
It's to accept it, and it's also, there's been a very little accountability held. Trade unions have not been held accountable for a lot of the action for a long time. And they are the key player. I mean, if they cannot control their membership, they must admit to the company that the membership's out of control and that they're dealing with the individuals. But it doesn't usually work. That it's a much more worrying scenario.
Don't help.
No,
guys. Super looking forward to this. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot to be written about this, and I'm really, really looking forward to reading these pieces. Thank you so much to you guys for joining me on this one. And good to have you guys, or rather, good to be back. I mean, say good to have you guys back. No, I'm the one who's away. Good to be back, guys. Thank you so much for watching this Monday installment of The Daily Friend. Remember, you can find all our written pieces, all that hard analysis on the Daily Friend website at dailyfriend.co.za. And of course, as I always ask, we need your help and your support. Please consider becoming a monthly donator to the Institute of Race Relations through our Daily Friend campaign. It's a crowdfunding campaign, and you can do that by SMSing your name to 32823. Terms and conditions do apply, and an SMS will cost you £1. And if you don't like SMSs because you think, hey, old school, I'm new school, no worries. Find us online, irr.org.za/join, and you can sign up a monthly debit order there. Guys, look out for other content. We are out, as I always remind you, on a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday. Find us on my YouTube page, that's Big Daddy Liberty, or the IRR YouTube page. Subscribe, hit that bell notification so that you're notified every time stuff comes out. Look out also for The Big Liberty Show. I will be dropping an episode this week, and a whole host of vlogs from my time in Germany. Some interesting stuff that I think you guys should watch out for. Guys, thank you so much. We'll see you on Wednesday.